I'll concede your point just for brevity. But
What? Brevity? We don't do that around here. It's probably
No.
Citrus, or what is a Capital One Bowl? It used to be Citrus Bowl, right?
oh my
Capital
God,
One.
dude, where have you been?
I just like the real name.
It hasn't been the Citrus Bowl since 2002?
What was your highlight side dish from Thanksgiving?
Oh gosh, Scotch.
This is the Buck Around, the podcast devoted to all things Wisconsin Badger football from a fan perspective. Featuring your hosts, Richard Branch and Maxwell Brusky.
And hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Buck Around. Welcome back to episode 335 of the Buck Around. I am one half of the Buck Around, Richard Branch, joined by my snarky colleague, Maxwell Brusky. Max, how are you?
I'm good. Maybe I'm just catching up sleep. It was a pretty late one on Saturday.
Well, you gave me a lot of guff before we hit the button here about, is my audio quality okay?
Oh my goodness. I don't know, man.
Passive aggressive, maybe.
I don't know.
I can sense the hostility. I think this game rubbed off on you a little bit. I'm a little concerned.
I think it might have. I don't know. I haven't had any mood swings. I mean, you and I were talking on Saturday night. Have you?
Have I?
Yeah.
It's interesting. I am a bit, what would be the term I would use about this? Like a bit schizophrenic about this game. I am simultaneously darker after my rewatch or like more pessimistic and more down on certain things. But at the same time, I think my general conclusion at the end of that game didn't really change a ton.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah.
We can get into that.
Yeah,
then.
we can.
All right. Okay.
But yeah, it's nice to be back on schedule. Glad we're sort of on a Monday instead of later in the week when people are trying to move on. I think also, given the fact it was not the greatest performance in the history of the Badgers, the most uplifting performance in the history of the Badgers, it's nice for people to just pull the Band-Aid and move forward. So, here we are. So why don't we get to our jam-packed talk around? People were just so excited, I guess, that I was back in the editing room because we got way too many phone calls. And I'm just going to say, ahead of time, there's a significant number of you who called who didn't make the cut, and I apologize. But, stiff competition. You know what?
I was going to say that's not a bad thing. And, that's a good thing.
Yeah. Iron sharpens iron.
Iron sharpens iron. But yeah, it was a lot of calls, and we can't listening to them and then putting them together for a why am I saying collaboration? A compilation.
Yes.
Are two different things. So without further ado, here we go.
Steve from Evanston. We are approaching game time, and I'm feeling cautiously optimistic, which means I'm almost certainly about to have my heart broken. Please don't break my heart.
West LA Made here.
It's Brendan from Evansville.
This is John in Minneapolis. And I don't know if I mentioned it. This is Pat in South Dakota. Very angry Pat in South Dakota.
John in San Francisco.
Tony from St. Paul, Minnesota.
Ross in Milwaukee.
First half, Badgers playing well. Unfortunately, some missed opportunities. Defense is playing lights out.
Atmosphere is awesome. Before the game, during the game, felt like pregame. It just felt like there was a big belief we were going to win that.
Let's get Atticus Bertram's a few more carries. He looked pretty good.
Going into halftime with 3 timeouts and a reasonable amount of time left on the clock to maybe get into field goal range, that's not going to win you a game against a better team.
How the heck is Franklin more mad about the illegal substitution, there's obviously 12, than Fickle is about the phantom hold call?
I really thought last night would be Braden Locke's opportunity to shut down any discussion of portal quarterbacks and be the quarterback of the future. Just did not happen last night.
Quarterback continues to be the missing piece here, and Braden Locke isn't going to get any better.
Locke cannot hit the receiver that is like the number one play in all of intramural sports. There's like 17 freshmen that can hit that play in Og Hall alone.
Just the same freaking crap all the time. We have a big play that just doesn't go our way, that pick six. The team just faded.
Thought if they would have held Tyler Warren to less than 50 yards receiving and Nick Singleton to, I think, in the 4s in yards per carry, that seemed like a winning strategy.
Just me, or did you see Danny O'Brien on the sideline during the game? And they called him the Maryland
quarterback.
Paul Chris era all over again? Like how little has changed?
Really let down by the offensive line. They got manhandled up front, especially in the second half.
How many times did we see them play a top team like this and have the running game completely shut down and have no answers?
Now is the time for the offensive line to dominate and get a couple of scores. What a disappointment.
I'm back to where I was after USC. Phil Longo is the impediment to any meaningful growth this year and success in the future.
To quote the late Denny Green, they are who we thought they are. Take back everything good I ever said about the team, ever.
This game went exactly how I expected it to, but the problem is, in the first half, I started to believe.
On Wisconsin.
Anyway, on Wisconsin.
Love the show, appreciate it, and on Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin.
On Wisconsin. Beat Iowa, beat Minnesota, beat Nebraska 8-4. That's my goal for this year on Wisconsin. Go Badgers.
All right. A lot of spice in there.
There was a lot of spice. A broad range of emotion would be the.
Yes. Brendan from Evansville, though. I mean, he always sounds so excited, no matter what.
I know. I'm just going to tell you what I think. I mean, there were a bit of. I mean, he did point out Nick Singleton was held in check, but that didn't account for Katrin now.
No, it didn't.
Unfortunately.
I kept saying out loud, man, Katrin Allen is a load.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
He's a steam train, man.
Yeah, hey, since we're talking about running backs or Penn State running backs, should we just start with the defense then?
I think we should. Yeah,
because I think that's the easier one, right?
I think so too. I think so too. Yeah, and honestly, even as it happened, and at the end of it, I didn't really have much to say one way or the other.
It was kind of a weird game, right?
Yeah.
Because I feel like top line, you can't say giving up 21 points to Penn State in this game because again, there's a pick six that has nothing to do with them. I feel like, okay, that should be enough, right? Like that's enough out of the defensive side of the ball. If you hold Penn State to 21 points. I mean, Penn State isn't an offensive juggernaut, but they're good.
Oh yeah.
So they have weapons.
Not only are they good, they got dudes.
Yeah. You do like for me, the weird part of this thing, right? When you're trying to look at this defense, their two quarterbacks, Alar and Drew Aller. Why I keep calling him Alar? Everybody puts the emphasis on the wrong.
People do that all the time. Yeah,
it's the emphasis on the wrong syllable, and I got to stop doing that. The Drew Aller and Prabula were like, what were they, like 26 for 31, 25 for 31 passing.
Yeah, pretty efficient.
But they only averaged 7.9 yards an attempt on that kind of crazy high completion percentage. And I want to say 4 of those are shovel passes to Tyler Warren.
Yeah. There was a shovel pass yesterday I think in the Bears game. I got a touchdown and I was said to my wife, I'm like, do you remember that number 44 from Penn State getting like 4 of those?
Yeah.
Yesterday night.
So it was
take weird. That out, right?
Yeah, but I mean, even if you looked at their numbers, I was looking between them, and their numbers aren't too far off. Like, well, I mean, I guess they kind of are a little bit off. So Aller attempted 16 passes, Prabula attempted 13. Aller threw 4 balls behind the line of scrimmage. So did Prabula, right? Of passes less than 10 yards, Aller threw 5. Prabula threw 6. What's interesting is passes attempted beyond 10 yards. Aller threw 7. Prabula threw 3. So they never really pushed the ball, especially, they did a little bit with Aller, but with Prabula, they didn't. And they basically just sat under the zone all day and took what was there more or less, but didn't produce a ton. It's just it's a hard game to wrap my head around. Do you know how many plays of more than 20 yards there were for both teams? What would you guess? How about that? I counted it. It's a dumb question, but
sure.
I don't mean it like an animal.
If I had to guess and like looking back on it, I don't know if for combining both teams.
Yeah, both teams.
5 or 6.
Yeah, it's 6. Right? Do you know how many each had?
Wisconsin 4, Penn State 2.
No, it's 3 and 3.
3-3.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it is. Wisconsin did have one called back by a
correct
by a holding penalty. I will say that, and then Penn State the drop.
Yeah,
that really bad drop. Julian Fleming of all players.
I know.
I mean that would have been a 20+1 too, probably.
Yes, it would have.
Yeah.
So it's
Anyway.
not like these offenses. It's not like Penn State was explosive, and
No, not by any
I was only
means.
comparing the two because Wisconsin certainly was not explosive, but neither was Penn State. And the only thought, like, if I was to critique anything defensively, I mean, you did learn one thing. Like, the reason they completed 26 of 30 or 25 of 31 passes, there was no pass rush. That really, it went back to what you saw at the beginning of the year. And I think that's more just an indication of, do you think that they regressed in some way? Or do you just simply think it's an indication of the talent they're playing against? Because that's my take.
Yeah, I just think they're not that good. I mean, I was talking to somebody and they don't have a game record, or they don't have they don't have a game record, or they don't have war daddies, either one. I feel like they're playing at about like as well as they can play, but none of those guys are war daddies. They're just not. They just don't have that guy. So yeah, can you imagine if there was like a Nick Herbig or maybe a TJ Watt or even Vince Beagle or somebody like that? Like, they don't have anybody that's like that.
It would cover up a lot of, just an edge rusher would cover up a lot
Yeah,
for you. I do agree.
It would. The other thing about that too is that how many of those passes, I don't want to go, get you back into the breakdown there, but how many of those were wheel routes? Like Singleton was killing it on those.
I mean, most of them were just, I mean, if you want to call it a wheel or whatever, but it was just out lateral.
Right.
For
and that
sure.
to me is that's as much of a linebacker issue as as the lack of the pass rush. And it's funny too, we were looking at the Pro Football grades and the snap counts. The 5 highest graded players on the defense were linebackers: Pius, Lowry, Thomas, and Allegro.
I mean,
I mean, take it for what it's worth, because I agree with you. The pass rush wasn't just, it was a non-factor.
Well, I mean, some of it was, I mean, the way I look at this defense is, one, like in that game, the thing that's different than the past, which I think I would take as a sign of encouragement, is even though they really didn't have a pass rush, the linebackers were far more effective in this game. I would argue Thomas and Chaney were far more effective in this game than they were in any other big game they have played. And that was the best inside. I think I'm willing to go as far as say that was the best inside linebacker we've seen as viewers of the Badgers in a big game of Fickell's tenure. I mean, it's not a huge sample size, but clearly the best they've played. I didn't feel like I was watching guys running to the wrong gaps. They weren't getting gashed, for big run plays when clearly there's a misfit in a gap scheme. Like, guys knew where they were supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. I don't disagree with you. And I remember, I feel like it was even in the second half. And I remember saying out loud, like, I think this is as good. Jaheim Thomas is finally being what you thought Jaheim Thomas was going to be in this game.
I think he played his best game as a
midriff and all.
Yes. I mean, he had a couple spots where he knifed through. It's just the play wasn't going towards him. It was just some bad luck there. But I saw that. And the other thing is, like, it was clear their focus was much more run heavy than it has been really against any opponent yet this year. Because I feel like I saw it in the snap counts. Like, there's an interesting thing. Aaron Witt played 33 snaps. John Pius, on the other hand, only played 14. Like, that is a mirror image of what it is week to week. And why is that? Well, John Pius is a pass rusher. Aaron Witt is not a pass rusher. Aaron Witt is there to be an edge setter, try to control the run, sit there in a zone read. That's his goal.
Right.
Austin Brown played 45 snaps. Max
Lofi we thought that.
Yeah, Max Lofi played 12. Yeah. Jaheim Thomas, like, this is the one that really, I think, sells it to you. He played 50. Tackett Curtis played 5. Like, I know Curtis's numbers do a little bit of this, and for people who can't see at home, I'm doing my sine curve.
They're up and down
from week to week, but this is a low, and I think it really just has to do with the fact that he's not a run fitty guy yet. He is much more the lanky weave through traffic guy, and I really do feel like they were going kind of to the heavier side against Penn State than they have against really any other opponent this year. It felt very much more, this was kind of old school Big Ten a little bit in terms of the heaviness of it. The only, I guess if I was going to say something that, like, okay, what's something that you would take issue with is I do feel like once Aller was out in the second half, I don't feel like there was much of a change on defense. It felt
well, something was missing in terms of adaptation, and I think that's a lot of what I saw and heard from the comments and complaints and fans and whatnot was would it have been better with Aller still in the game?
Kind of almost felt like it, because the thing was, I felt like they didn't load up, they didn't get heavier in the box at all. And it became pretty clear to me. I mean, again, going back to just, the depth on that, like they weren't going to have Pribula throw the ball down the field much. And you could have gotten a little maybe heavy. It felt like they were still in kind of a nickel box, even though, you have that safety sitting there half a yard behind the linebackers, almost as an extra linebacker. It still didn't quite feel like, it felt like, you could probably use a body on your defensive line, because you still ended up, you'd look at them set up with Pribula and you've got, a rush linebacker outside the he's in that like 9 tech spot almost.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And you're looking at it and you go, oh, the zone read is just going to go right behind that tackle. And boom, goes right behind that tackle. And they can get 7, 8, 9 yards. And they were just going to take that. Now, if you want to argue that prevented something bigger, maybe. Again, it can't kill it. It's 21 points. But it did feel a little bit like if there was something that I went, it didn't feel like I didn't see the dials turned at all. It definitely would be that, because the defense did feel pretty similar from first half to second that way.
Sure. Well, it did. I don't want to get into an extended discussion about it, but I would like to hear one from someone about what they didn't do when the quarterback went from Aller to Pribula.
Yeah.
Because it really seemed kind of weird. But the other part of this, it seemed like, I even said this when I was watching it, that it reminded me a lot of like, the 19 or the 20 or 21 defenses, where the opening drive, maybe they score. The second drive, maybe they score. But like after that, like they got locked in, I felt like. Because it was the first touchdown drive they had.
Yeah.
Oh, excuse me. Was it the opening? Was it their first possession where they had the drop, or was that their second possession?
That was. Hang on, I'll look at my notes and I'll tell you. That was their second possession.
The first one was with a touchdown.
Oh no, wait, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong quarter. It was their first possession. My apologies.
Okay, and then the second possession wound up in a touchdown.
The second possession wound up in a touchdown.
Right. So it reminded me a lot of that. And as the second quarter went on, they weren't doing much. And I wonder what would have happened had Aller not gone out of the game, and if that would have remained quote unquote figured out. But it reminded me a lot of that, where it took them a minute to settle in, and fortunately it was only a touchdown, but it took them a minute to settle in, and once they did, they were really good for the rest of the game, up until the end. I mean, those two other touchdowns didn't happen until the fourth quarter, and the second one that happened, I mean, you could tell they were just beat.
Yeah, they were gassed.
You know what I mean? That's I can't put that on them too much. So yeah, overall, I think the defense is just fine. So what do you say? Or what would you say as far as the personnel and the snap counts? Probably the same thing this week, right?
I think it's going to look similar, right? I mean, you're playing a team that is going to be much more intentional with the run, right? It's not going to be like, what's coming, I guess. I mean, so much of that Penn State offense is shift and misdirection and weird gap scheme stuff. Like it's so clear
when you're guerrilla warfare.
Yeah, you're motioning offensive linemen across the field. I mean, it's a weird deal, right? I said to you, or I said to somebody else, I'm like, if this wasn't Penn State, I would really like watching this. It's really fun. Well, I mean, Penn State does a great job of making themselves likable when Drew Aller's walking off the field screaming at somebody. He did it twice.
My wife, he's got such a punchable face.
He's out of his mind.
I know. He saw that. He looked like he was a petulant child.
He did. He was screaming at somebody on the sidelines. Like, I mean, it was some jerk who said something jerky, but dude, just go to the locker room and get your hamstring checked out.
Yeah, no, I saw that too.
Go. But anyways, yeah, I don't have a ton. Let's go to the offense, because I think that's real. I mean, look, we've said this. I think thematically, I don't think you can argue you have seen anything but an arc of improvement on the defense through the year, right? Like
100%. Yeah.
this defense is in a much better place than it was 4 games ago, 5 games ago. It showed in the results.
And it would look even better if they had a game wrecker or
sure.
I keep going back to Ward Daddy, but if they had All-American style player in the front seven.
Yeah.
They just do not. So
yeah. So let's talk about a team that has an All-American style player on the front seven, and that would be Penn State. And let's talk about the offense that they went against this past week, which would be Wisconsin's, because that's really the meat and potatoes of this whole thing. This is what everybody's talking about.
Yep.
I know we should start with Braden Locke. But if you will indulge me, I kind of want to
I will absolutely indulge you. Yeah, I'll save that for later.
Up to that, because I feel like all of this sort of leads into that.
Please. Yeah, no, that's cool.
The big one for me that I am, like the thing that is legitimately most puzzling to me at this point, if you ask me, what is the thing about the offense that most surprised you this past week? Or even like what has surprised you the most over the course of this season? It is Will Pauling and his drops. Like I am straight up ready to say like it is I don't understand what's going on there. And I'm like, it's something that is worth talking about you need to talk about it at this point. He has 8 drops on the season.
That's ridiculous.
On, let's see how many targets. On 63 targets this year.
That's ridiculous.
That is a lot of drops. And I will go so far, like when I rewatched the game.
Yes.
I went through and tracked. I just was like, I'm going to track the drops. And I am going to, not because I had an agenda or anything, but I'm like, I really want to turn a fine tooth, sort of like really, drill down on the receivers and track drops. I had 6 in the game. And I know there's 2 that I have that I'm willing to bet Pro Football Focus didn't. One was Tretch when he gets hit by the safety.
Yes.
And that would be a plus catch. Don't get me wrong. But I was like, oh man, that one I got.
I felt at the time that was a drop.
And I had the other one that I had that I'm assuming Pro Football Focus didn't was Pauling on the one that they reviewed, where he kind of rolls and it drops it. Like that was in his hands.
Oh, yeah. Like in the fourth quarter, though?
Yeah, but it was not that. It was that last possession. Yes, but it matters to me. Because no. They were going full speed. Like that's another drop.
Yes. No doubt. Yeah.
It didn't change the game. Don't get me wrong. And I don't think any of these drops changed the game. Like, it's interesting. They did call CJ Williams on that one when Locke is kind of rushing to the outside and he throws it low. I called that a drop. I didn't think they would, but they did.
I thought it was. It didn't look like it in real time.
But then when you see
when
the
it's
replay,
moving, but then when you see the replay, like, God, dude, you got to catch that.
You're there and you should get that one.
You got to catch that.
But to circle back to Pauling, those are a lot of drops, and I don't understand. Like, why are we in Skylar Bell territory with Will Pauling now? Because that's where it's at. Like, this is what you saw with Skylar Bell last year. I think
it might be worse, isn't it?
I mean, I'd have to compare the numbers. But
whatever the numbers say. But I feel like it's worse.
I think it feels worse probably because you've seen Will Pauling have an entire season without it being an issue.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, Skylar Bell was sort of an emerging player, and that was, you know what I mean? Like, he was not, it's not like he was the primary receiver the year before.
I think the funnier part of it too is when that happened, my wife says your team's not going to win this game because they're literally dropping the ball. Like literally dropping the ball. And I'm like, I don't understand what number 6's problem is, but if they throw it to number 2, he never drops them.
That was some karma.
It was like right then. Almost as bad as the way I felt about the pick 6.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to. But
yeah,
you and I were talking. I mean, if they don't have those drops, there were 3 or 4 first downs in there. Those drives don't stop. I think they get into the end zone at least once in the first half.
Yeah, potentially, right? Like those cobbled together
in a lot whether or not they win, I'm not going to go that far, but the game looks a lot different at halftime with half of those drops. Without any of them, oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, that's so much they left on the table.
I mean, like something between all. I mean, a lot of those got some yards on subsequent plays. But to your point, I feel like you're going to cobble, 3, 4, 5 points, whatever you want to say, normatively out of it.
Did you, when I was watching it, did you feel like they backed off of that? Like they backed off of passing? Because they really didn't when you go by the numbers.
No, I don't. So
when I was watching it, I did feel like that.
Let's save that for the lock part. Because
okay,
I
sure.
have a theory on it. Because I
have a theory too. Yep.
Because Longo caught a lot of shrapnel, which is, I'm not trying to change anybody's opinion on it, but for me, in the initial and in the rewatch, I didn't come away from this going, we as fans are seeing a Longo play calling issue. I think that's a different story.
Awesome. I wonder if your theory is going to be the same as mine.
Yeah. So
or how close they're going to be.
Yeah. The other part, the offensive line. Right. And were you surprised? They did not look good. Like they didn't look good. Right. I mean, Joe Brunner got destroyed.
He did. He had a bad game.
He had a really bad game. Who I think quietly has been, I mean, they've all been real good. Don't get me wrong. They've been solid left to right. But I thought he was sort of quietly the one you're like, that dude has been really good. Yeah. And he did not look good. And we had 2023 Jack Nelson again.
Yes.
We had tentative overthinking Jack Nelson again.
Yeah, jacked up Jack Nelson.
Yeah.
I think he was just too jacked up.
You think that's
just too, yeah, I do. It was the kind of thing where he got the moment overcome by the moment, I think, which happens. I'm surprised it would for a veteran player like him, but that's what I chalked it up to.
It's interesting.
I don't know. I thought the offensive line would be better, and honestly, in pass protection, they weren't that bad.
They weren't bad in pass protection.
No, but I don't know if it's the offensive line or the Penn State front seven being that good.
I am wondering. I think
better than I thought.
I think some of it was schematic because I felt like a couple of the Nelson hold was quite clearly he thought he was blocking the outside guy, and the outside guy dropped in coverage, and so he's out of position. Like I know everybody said like he was back in his pass set too quick, and it's like okay maybe, but it also sure looked like he thought he wasn't sure who he had to block there. And he kind of guessed wrong, and then he got beat.
Sure.
The front, Penn State changed their fronts a lot. They really did move their fronts around a lot. And the part you can't get over is, again, you have an All-American defensive end or outside linebacker out there.
You do, but you also have some,
and interior guys. Yes.
Their defensive staff and the coordinator. I mean, it's Tom Allen. Like that guy knows what he's doing, and not only that, like. He knows the Badgers. Like he knows the team. He knows those players, and knows what Longo's tendencies are. So I wouldn't. I'm surprised they weren't a little tougher, and I don't know if that's the time to go into my theory.
Okay.
Because I really think that I really do. Maybe I'm nuts that I think Fickle and Longo were like, you guys want to win these kind of games? This is what you got to do. You got to run the ball. You got to push, and you got to take over the game against the best teams you're going to play. Like this is what you have to do, and I think they challenged them to do it.
You do,
whether it didn't work or not. And I felt that's why even towards the end, when you're still thinking, why are you running the ball? Why are you still trying to run the ball? I think that was the other thing. And then the other part of that is I feel like for whatever they were going to do again outside of that, did a running back even catch a pass?
No. Dupree went out on a little swing kind of screen thing at one point, and Locke threw away. I mean, it was covered up, and Locke went.
It was a target, but it was a target. That was the only target, I feel like.
No, I'm sorry. He caught one. He caught one.
He caught one. Okay.
For 15, but there was a second one. Dupree caught one for 15. It was a swing pass. And then there was one other one where they sent him out because he didn't play a ton of snaps.
No, he really didn't. No.
Where they sent him out wide in like a little screen setup that they just threw the other way on it.
Yeah.
But,
so,
yeah.
Being is that like the whatever the alternatives that you might have called in terms of play calling, which again, we're here to evaluate, not second guess. Okay.
Right.
Right. That, excuse me, they don't feel comfortable in those options.
Okay.
You know what I mean? And Yacovelli didn't play at all.
No, I don't think he played
For everybody, for everybody to get talking about that, I mean, if they thought it would work, they would do it, right?
Yeah.
So but the main thrust of that really though is the continuing running the ball, especially up the middle. I really do think that was Fickle and Longo challenging them.
Okay.
Reminded me a lot of Ohio State in 2010, but it also, a lot of this game too, and a lot of this portion of it reminded me of the Ohio State game in 2009, where the offensive line was pretty good. Tolzien was pretty sharp, but he threw a pick six and they gave up a kickoff return for a touchdown, and then he had another interception later in the game, where it was just like they're not quite there yet. Like they're just not quite there yet.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And in 2010 they were there, doing a lot of the same stuff with most of the same team.
So I have a different take on this, but don't feel bad because mine, and you're going to have to forgive me on this one, is pretty vibey in the same way yours is pretty vibey.
Well, I think since you indulged me, I think we can.
All right.
I think we can do that mutually.
The reason I've been so mine centers on the guy we haven't talked about yet, and that would be one quarterback, Braden Locke.
Mm-hmm.
And it really centers for me, like the second viewing of this game did a lot for me. It did a lot for me, and it really shaped a lot of my perspective in this game because it, as I said at the top, it took me to a darker place in terms of not how I feel, but sort of a state of the team in a certain way. But at the same time, it doesn't really change my general trajectory of things. And I am going to admit this thought, I don't know if it was germinated by a message I received from one of our friends of the show, but he sent me something that got me thinking. It didn't get me thinking at the time, but I think indirectly it just stayed in the back of my mind.
Sure.
But
sure.
He wrote me the following message here. I'm going to keep you anonymous. You know what? I'm not keeping you anonymous, Ben in LA. The hell with it.
Yeah.
He sent me this message, and I'll throw it out there.
Sure.
And he said, "This is dumb, but I feel like you can judge a quarterback by what their face looks like with a helmet on. And he looks like he is always worried. He looks like old Eli Manning." Ooh. And I kind of laughed at that at the time because I think it was like 50% meant to be a joke.
Wish he played like old Eli Manning.
Yeah. But I started watching the game again. You know, that was I think he sent me that before I watched it a second time because I was watching it last night. And something really jumped out to me in that. There was a couple things with Locke. Number one, in that game, he threw the ball, let me look, I think it's 42 times. 42 times. On a significant number of snaps, especially in the first, about 2/3 of the first half, and then from the basically 5 minutes into the third quarter on, he never looked the least bit comfortable with the ball in his hands. I counted for myself just watching those throws, he had 12 throws that I would say were either like these kind of quick snap, like real quick trigger throw that he ends up turfing or overthrows somebody. Yeah. Like when he had Ashcraft deep and he's so quick to snap that ball out. And you're like, oh, you had Ashcraft there.
He had Pauling open too.
And he had Pauling
open on that for a touchdown. Yeah.
On another one. And it was either that or a throw that was offline or a throw into coverage. So obviously the pick six, but also the not interception that was so obviously thrown into double coverage to Vinny Anthony where it's just a panic and huck. He had so many of these throws that looked like that. So as I'm watching this game, I'm going, man, that body language is funky. And then you add it on top of that. Every time I saw his face, he looked so downtrodden. And this is really abstract, but he gave me no vibes like this guy felt like he had a chance to win the game. This is super vibey, and it's very not me, and I will freely admit it, but it just gave me like this
in
dread.
The first half too?
Yes, even in the first half. Yeah. I mean, it would come and go in waves. Like he's a guy, it just felt like to a certain degree he was getting bullied. Like he looked bullied to me, for lack of a better term, because he was really nervous about that pass rush and getting the ball out in time and not getting stuck in traffic where he's going to fumble, that kind of thing, and get the ball out quick and and help your offensive line out, that he just didn't look like he had any comfort in what he was seeing and what he was doing because he had to react so quickly. Yeah. On top of that, the other part that plays into it, which is why I kind of like, I'm giving the Longo stuff and the creative play calling sort of theme a pass, is a lot of what they're doing, and you watch throughout that game, those are RPOs. Those are straight up RPOs.
Yes.
And Locke was so uncomfortable in that game. He did not look willing to pull the ball at all. They were I wanted to track it. I just didn't have enough time because we're back on a normal schedule. If I had another day, I would have watched the game a third time just on those rushing snaps and actually the passing snaps too, just to see how many RPOs he pulled. Because there are, numerous plays where I go, oh, look, there's a 7-yard slant. Like the stuff we talked about last week where we said like the passing game feels like it is integrated into the running game and it is not just to keep teams honest. It is a part of the offense. Like all that stuff we talked about last week, even though they didn't execute against Northwestern, I'm like, oh, I feel so good because, now I get what the passing game is doing. Like it serves a purpose other than to keep a defense honest. It was not serving that purpose in this game because he was unwilling to pull the ball. He was afraid to pull it and snap that 7-yard slant. I really do feel that. He was afraid to pull it and run the ball because they were crashing down again, like we saw early on.
I think the first and goal play was one of those where I think he could have and should have ran that in just like the Northwestern one.
Yeah,
I was kind of surprised he didn't too.
Yeah, and
I didn't notice it like you did, but I noticed it when it happened and kind of wondered what the deal was with that. But that really, I think you've provided a good framework for that, as vibey as it might be.
And it's very disheartening to see it because you even saw it
extremely disheartening
on some of the throws that were just straight up incompletions. And you've seen this in other games where he's sort of like waving at receivers, like, why weren't you there? Why weren't you here?
Yes.
And he did that on Saturday, but it was on balls he clearly is letting go too early. Like he hasn't waited to see how the receiver is actually going to break on the coverage, and he thinks he knows, but clearly they're not on the same page. They're not there. So I don't know who you want to put that on. I know I circle back, and I'm stealing this from Ryan on the Dairy Raid, but he had such a good line about it that has always stuck with me, where he said, when you only hear coaches talk about a player's smarts, like they can talk about a player being smart, but if it's the first thing they bring up every time and it's the only thing they seem to bring up, it means that he doesn't have anything else they can really talk about. And he is not just... When you take Braden Locke in this game and you pair that with the fact that he has receivers drop 6 balls, and you pair that with the fact that the offensive line did not have its best day, you're not going to win that game. So as bad as I saw this, and it was like, oh man, this was a deer in the headlight. This was a baby deer for him. He went baby deer in this game. He regressed to a baby deer. As bad as it was, it doesn't mean that I'm like selling my Braden Locke stock. And what I mean by that is I don't think there's anywhere to go this year. He is a ride or die for the season.
Yes.
But I also don't know, and I'm getting way far out, but I don't know if I'm going anywhere else after the year either.
You're putting a hold on his stock right now.
Well, like we're freezing the market. You know what I mean?
It's neither buy it or sell. It's a hold.
Oh no! Like we are halting trading. We need to let the market stabilize a little bit because I think people are going to whipsaw from this one. Because
definitely.
And I'm going to freely admit, I think I have this comparison is a little too ensconced in my brain at this point. But I pulled up Jack Cohn from 2018 against a certain opponent called Penn State.
Sure.
Do you remember? Because I never remember these games. That's the game they lost. I think it's 22-10?
They did. And it was, I think, the week after the Northwestern game. So it would have been his second start. Penn State was a pretty good Penn State team, but not a great, probably about, I think maybe not even quite as good as this one.
They were 17th in the country. But I think they're a half a step behind this team, but not massively.
Right. Exactly. Yes, exactly. But the thing about that game, though, is it was 25-mile-an-hour winds throughout most of the game. Like it was really, really, really windy.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I remember about it. I don't remember much else other than Jonathan Taylor couldn't get much going.
Trace McSorley found a way to throw the ball in that game. He was
Maybe
19
that's-
for 25 for 160.
Maybe that's why I forgot about it.
So here's a fun fact. Let me read you the blurb from uwbadgers.com, which you might say has a vested interest in trying to put forth the best spin it could.
Sure.
Unless maybe it's an AP article.
They're
It
not
doesn't
going to
say
be
here.
overly critical.
Yes.
Yes.
A quick start saw Jonathan Taylor put the Badgers on the board first, but Wisconsin's offense struggled in a 22-10 loss to number 21 Penn State. Taylor hurtled down the field on the Badgers' first possession of the game with a 71-yard scoring drive in the opening possession. He finished with 185 yards and 20 carries for his ninth game this season, topping the 100-yard mark. However,
my memory was not that. Holy cow.
I remember that one.
Yeah.
However, Badger quarterback Jack Cohn completed only 9 of 20 passes for 60 yards with 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles. Cohn attempted just 4 passes in the first half and completed 2 for 10 yards.
My goodness.
Braden Locke, again, just keeps giving me Jack Cohn vibes. And I think at this point, I'm willing to just say, I am drawing no conclusions at this point. I mean, it's interesting to me because I saw, like, Jim Polzine wrote a column that pretty much tiptoes up to this ain't it, go get a transfer quarterback. I mean, he got this close. And I'm kind of like, But so I end up at where do I feel? Because I almost last week. So here's the thing. We didn't do it because we got long, but I had one question for you last week that I kind of wish I asked. But I said, you know what? We'll have a better picture of this after the Penn State game. And the question I almost asked, and I was sort of asking myself, and I'm curious what your opinion on is this. Are you cool this offseason? So remember after Alabama, Luke Fickell said, it's terrible what happened to Tyler, but if we can work something out, we'd love to have him back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Blah, 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 blah. And then Braden Locke took a game or two and then started to sort of track upwards. He's trending positively. And then I almost said to you after last week, if they rode into the offseason with Braden Locke and Mabry Matoyer sort of as your lead quarterback room, are you cool with that no matter what happened? Would you have said yes last week?
I don't think so.
No? Okay.
I think they need to add a body. Do you know what I mean? I don't know if whether that player is in the competition, just because you can tell. I think like a lot of stuff has to do with the fact now, and I know we talked about it, was they don't want Locke to do much running, and they don't want him to put his body at risk because there's literally no one guy behind him who's a freshman. You know what I mean? So I think they need somebody else. But as far as like somebody to come in like they have for the last 2 years. Oh boy, I don't know where I'm at now.
Okay.
I felt pretty good about it going into last week, but it wasn't like the deal wasn't sealed. You know what I mean? I felt like Locke was starting to maybe play up to his potential.
Okay.
And some of the stuff too. I mean, he did play in a big game last year against Ohio State. And I don't know, it'd be interesting to go back and see what, not by the numbers, but like your body language thing or the play calling was like in that game versus this one. Because I just got to think for him, like if you have a confidence problem, get over it. Okay. Like, so whatever you need to do, get over it. And I didn't listen to, apparently he said some really dumb thing in the post game about his pick 6.
I don't know that it was dumb. I thought it was pretty, I watched it.
Well, he said it was a bad decision. And again, all we hear is how smart you are. And your bad decisions should be a minimum, especially in big games. And I don't care what, like the way that went down, it was running play. And I'm like, he's going to freaking press and he's going to throw an interception. You just watch and he sure freaking did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just felt like you could see that coming. But what's the deal with that? Is that going to get better? It should, shouldn't it?
So that's the question you're trying to figure out is because he's a funny guy. For a guy that doesn't have a huge arm,
a funny guy. Yeah.
It's not like he's Mr. Pinpoint Accuracy because that throw, what he was trying to do, he just threw the ball offline. Like he was trying to get Ashcraft on the other side of that. I don't know if it was a safety or a linebacker who picked it off, but it was behind Ashcraft.
Yeah, it was a safety.
It doesn't matter. It was behind Ashcraft. Like it was
misplaced.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the tight window he was trying to put it in, he didn't throw it through. So I guess the way I interpreted his answer was more just, I own it. I did it. That's on me.
Yeah.
That was the calculation I made.
Okay. I didn't watch it for myself, so okay. Yeah.
So but I mean, you could interpret it however you want. He
Sure.
didn't seem, I don't know, but
I mean, I don't want her to be repentant. You know what I mean? My point is that I'm talking to my brother who watches a little bit of this stuff. He was at the game and he's like made the point that like Lockhead, he always makes one bonehead play a game. And it's like, why will that ever change?
It could be a young player. I mean, the thing to me is,
and that's what I'm willing to, like, my jury's still out on that yet.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I went back to Ohio State game last year. It's like, you do need some battle wounds. You do need to get this out of your, get these out of your system. It's a pretty rare player who goes into these things not having done them all the time and goes in there and performs. You know what I mean? It's not
Right.
everybody can do that. So I get that. But I would have just thought that this stuff would be a little more out of his system now, and he can do the things he's good at.
Okay.
More.
All
He's
right.
good at he's good at stuff, but just not good enough to overcome that stuff. Wait a minute though. I will say this. I thought the drive when they came back, and that was one where he had the long play to CJ Williams.
Mm-hmm.
That CJ Williams made a great catch on.
Yep.
I thought that was a pretty good response, actually. I thought I did not think that they were going to get dominated the rest of the game. I was very surprised that it was 3 and outs in a row after that. That I was very surprised about. And it was still when the defense was playing well. They were still in the game. But I thought that response after the pick six, because the other thing is, like, you see Jalen Milroe make throws like that and throw pick sixes like that.
Yeah. I have a feeling the thing to me is it felt very much, not that the wind was out of the sails. It's just once he threw that pick six, I think especially he was gun shy. I mean, yes, he had the throw. Yeah. He had the throw to CJ Williams, but that, if I remember, it was a design pass play. It wasn't one where he had to pull it and go.
I was gonna say where he has the latitude to make choices.
Because when he had the
Basically,
latitude to make choices, it was, I'm going to let somebody else. That's the way it felt. It felt like, I'm going to let Tui Walker run this thing in here and maybe he can bust something.
And there was a point too in the third quarter where the camera showed Tui Walker and he looked visibly frustrated. I don't know if you caught that.
I felt like I saw that with
Mr. Body Language guy.
I felt like I saw that with a lot of them.
Yeah, there was one with Walker though where they showed him and he was like, "Damn it, man!" Where he looked pissed. Not frustrated, but like pissed at his teammates or pissed at the coaches. He wasn't pissed at Penn State. Put it that way.
All right, so let's look ahead here. Right, Badgers have at Iowa next week. They host Oregon. They're at Nebraska. They host Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
How are you feeling? Because as you saw, I put on the agenda, we got this email from John from San Francisco after the USC game. And I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking about sort of like when we said on that show, like, if you thought this was a 7-5 team back then, you figured they were going to be kind of 2-2-ish at that point. And why are people upset? And John said, Rich said he was confused. This is, again, going back, 4 weeks?
Mm-hmm.
So everybody remember that in terms of when this was written. He said, Rich said he was confused about fans' frustration over a 2-2 start when everyone agreed they were a 7-5 or 8-4 team at the beginning of the season and knew they would lose to Alabama and USC. I think fans are frustrated because this doesn't look like a 7-5 team right now. They look like a 5-7 team who will probably be underdogs against everyone left on their schedule outside of Purdue and Northwestern. There have been few signs of improvement over the last year, and they rank in the 90s or worse nationally in most offensive statistics and in the 60s or worse for most defensive statistics. To put it simply, this team sucks. I am curious because I feel like a lot of those people, like I think John's sentiment represented a lot of people. I'm curious if they moved from that to something more positive in the past few weeks, but now plummeted back down, or look at this as, well, I've seen some proof of concept in the past few weeks that gives me, I don't know what it is, like optimism in these last 4. Like they're not going to beat Oregon, unless it's some freak thing. They're not beating Oregon. No. So put that aside. But I'm curious what people's perspectives are on the rest of the year, and what yours is. Right? Because they're going to Iowa, playing Saturday night, blah, 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 blah. You'll be there. Where are you at?
I think they should be able to win every game on their schedule, and I look forward to them doing that with the exception of Oregon.
Do you?
I don't know what kind of game they're going to give Oregon. I mean, Illinois just got the doors blown off of them. Illinois doesn't suck. There were two games actually that were kind of funny this weekend in that same time frame. Because the Alabama Missouri game was the same thing. Like Missouri didn't even score, did they?
No, they just got suffocated out of that game.
Yeah. And Missouri's ranked. Missouri is still ranked, by the way. Illinois is still ranked, by the way, after both of those games. That's how much credit they gave them for those performances.
Mm-hmm.
And they got whipped. So in this game, it's not like the Badgers got whipped. I mean, we're sitting here talking about how many mistakes they made and how it was all there for them in a big situation where they would have been, the darling team had they were able to win this game. And I just don't think it's as bad as it looks. Or as some people might feel about it. I mean, I'm not revisiting anything that we've just said about Locke, but this whole situation reminded me a lot of the games they played in 2009. Iowa was another one at Camp Randall that they lost that game on, based on a lot of mistakes that they made. I think this is a lot like that. I see there's a lot of improvement and a lot of, I don't know, the old identity thing. I think they tried to do what they had become good at and what had been working. It's just with this game, Penn State's defense is that good.
Yeah.
It is. The front seven is that good. And I might have undersold it, even with Abdul Carter, but they are that good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what they haven't beat Penn State since 2011. You know what I mean? Like, right. What did you think after the 2013 end of the season when they have like an outside shot? Had they beat Penn State on senior day with Chris Borland and blah 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 blah, and they just go lay a complete freaking egg. Was it existential at the time? And it was a new coach. I mean, that was Gary Anderson's final, the final regular season game of the year. And that Penn State, like Hackenberg had been so up and down that whole year. And I know they had, who was the receiver that they had that year who played? Allen Robinson.
Was that Allen Robinson? Yeah.
Yeah, that was Allen Robinson. But they haven't beat him since 2011. That's a lot of good teams that have lost to Penn State. Not just this one. I get it. It was there for them, but we're sitting here talking about mistakes. And how mistakes made the game less competitive. Not talking about how they just got their doors blown off like Illinois and Missouri did. I mean, you think Missouri fans are sitting here saying, I think we should fire the coach and I think we're done. I just don't think this is going to work out with Eli Drinkwitz. No, I don't just see it happening. And they got dominated and blown away. Didn't even score a freaking point. So, yeah. So as far as the rest of the season goes, I'm really looking forward to this Saturday. It's not like Iowa's any great shakes either. I'm not going to base on what you think about them about beating and putting 40 points on this year's Washington or what they did this past weekend against Northwestern. I think everybody agrees Northwestern sucks. Right? I mean, oh, wow, they put 40 points on Northwestern. The Badgers should have put 40 points on Northwestern's last weekend, too. So I'm not worried about that. It's not like Nebraska's any good either. I mean, they stepped up and played a good line of scrimmage game against a really good team. But, I mean, take from that what you want. And then Minnesota, there's no reason to worry about Minnesota. I mean, that should be a good game. Make no mistake, those games are going to be tough. And those three, old Big Ten West games are all on the road. So it'll be tough, but they shouldn't. There's no reason to hang your head and think they're just going to lose and not make a bowl.
Yeah.
They'll at least win one of them. I think they should win three. I think you should win 3 out of the 4 of them. I think you should beat those teams. And God knows what, if they put up some points and hold Oregon to under 30. I mean, that'd be kind of cool, but I don't think they're going to win then.
Right. All right. So, I mean, what you're saying is it still falls within that sort of 7-5-ish, 8-4-ish track.
100%, which is where I've been the whole season. The schedule is extremely difficult.
Yeah. That's kind of where I am more or less. I think that the thing people have to keep in mind is if you're looking at a 7-5 or 8-4-ish team, there's going to be games where they don't look good.
Right.
They're not going to lose every game by a whisker.
Yeah, I think it was the year that Mississippi State came off of being number 1. So it would have been the next year. And I don't know. I can't remember if they had Dak Prescott or not, but they were a borderline playoff team. They were ranked number 1 during the year. I think it was 2014. And then the next year, either that or the year before, I don't remember, one of the two. But my point is that they were 8-4 and all the team and everybody they lost to was LSU, Alabama,
right,
Georgia. You know what I mean? It was all the teams that they were supposed to lose to. I mean, this this can be that, right? Don't you think?
I mean, they're just not. Again, I think what people get frustrated with, which is weird when you're looking at a 7-5 team, is they're not punching up. I don't know that you could expect this team to do a ton of punching up, given what you've seen thus far. But it can still track to that 7-5, 8-4.
They haven't punched up since 2010.
Yeah,
So I don't think that's any different. And you can be frustrated about that. I mean, that's fine, but that's kind of, I don't know if it's howling at the moon, but I think you could say that since then. I mean, when is the last time they punched up?
Right.
LSU in 2016, which turned out to be unranked and fired their coach halfway
Right.
through. What else has there been?
All right. So let's do this. Let's get out of here because we're getting long. We need under the radar players of the game, Max, to circle back. I should have saved this for after.
I think it's your turn. I bet you.
No, it was mine last week.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. I have
Sure.
2, though. I don't know if you'll allow my number 1.
Well, mine is a guy who we've had in the past is Forkerine.
Okay, he was going to be mine.
I can never say his name right.
Forkerine.
Yeah, Forkerine.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Do you kind of...
It's our show, so yes,
it's rhetorical, Max. It's rhetorical. So I think that's a great pick, mostly because can I just say I have never been more impressed? Well, I don't know if never, but it has been a long time since I can remember being more impressed with the open field tackling skills of a Badger cornerback.
Oh, for sure, especially on Tyler Warren.
I mean, he didn't.
Yeah,
he didn't tackle him. Like he needed help, but he stuck him and got some help, and
the
that
help
was
came. Yeah, for sure.
A 260-pound tight end he brought to the ground.
Yep,
it's legit. And
twice.
He is really impressive in terms of, if I just may say, like the pad level on his tackling, like he is always low. And it's so impressive how clean he is as a tackler and how he can take on big bodies.
He'll have a chance on Sundays. I will tell you. I
agree.
That. Yeah, he's such a sound player.
Well, because he's bigger bot. Like I think he's a guy. So it's funny you say that, and I know we don't talk NFL. Like, who cares if they're going to be good in the NFL or not? But I do feel like he and Wohler both give me the vibes of guys who will hang around in the league maybe longer than they should, the kind of the Dare way, where it's like, I can be a special teams guy and I can be your 5th cornerback that you can use in a pinch. And Wohler can be that 4th safety kind of guy. And then all of a sudden they're 31 years old and they're still on NFL rosters.
As a small aside, did it crack you up to see Wohler start to actually return a punt? To say you can do more than fair catch it, like you have a green light.
Yeah,
it did me.
It did. I
just didn't want to see him get hurt.
No, I didn't want to see him get hurt either. He is not a natural punt returner, but like I said last week, he just. My suggestion was Giacomelli, and I realized Giacomelli will look. They're built the same. They're going to look exactly the same.
They're very similar.
So there's just no answer back there, and they trust him. So yeah, I'm not thinking about it anymore. But if I wasn't going to be allowed Forkerine, because I felt like maybe Forkerine was too obvious, because he did get a lot of praise.
I felt like that too, but yeah.
Mine was going to be Thomas, because I do think Jaheim Thomas deserves actually.
He would have been my other one. Yep.
Yeah.
So
Credit for We are in lockstep there. So good for him. But big games in the B1G. The only note you had, which I don't know if we touched on it or not, you wanted to talk about the conference and its sort of perception. And
Not so much. No. Not so much this. It was a lot of what I saw after the game, because I wound up watching football for several hours after our game.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it was interesting to see, like, the final drive guy is like, you're right there, and it was after I had been saying to you and other people, like, I do feel like they're so close. Did you have any games to talk about?
No, the only thing I would say about the Big Ten and here's my thing, and that's why I'm kind of done sort of having takes on a lot of these games.
Mm-hmm.
There is this completely, like, if you took, let me just go to the Big Ten standings. I'm going to pull this. People can listen to me pull this up. It's very exciting. Let's just use the Big Ten standings as our barometer, right? If you draw a line, let's say at Ohio State, who is 4th technically right now. So you have Indiana, Oregon, Penn State, and Ohio State. And then you draw a line at Northwestern, which leaves you Northwestern, UCLA, Purdue. And you take all those teams in the middle there. So Illinois, Iowa, Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Nebraska, Michigan State, Washington, USC, Maryland, Rutgers. And I'm barely putting Maryland and Rutgers in there. Basically barely putting Maryland. I think Rutgers is better than Maryland. I feel like pretty much all those teams can just beat each other every week and they're all just going to cannibalize each other. It's very fascinating to watch a big conference, like where you're going to have so many teams that just sort of end up, 5-4 in the conference or 6-3. And it's just going to be a big mosh in the middle. And I don't know that, again, I mean, this is kind of the story of college football anyways, once you get out of the top 15 or whatever you want to say. Like everybody's kind of replaceable, but it's just weird to have it in a great big conference. When you have 18 teams in a conference and just a big mosh of teams. And it makes trying to make sense of a conference and have any sort of semi-rigid hierarchy in your mind kind of pointless.
Well, this is kind of a related point there too. When you look at those standings, I mean, I don't know how good you think Indiana is, but they haven't played anybody. And I don't care I don't care that that's a cliche, but it's freaking true. They haven't played anybody.
Yeah,
they've beaten everybody they played.
Yeah.
Or you're going to have Illinois, who's almost certainly, if you look at their remaining schedule, as long as they don't stub their foot, which they have in the past, even with Bielema, they should finish 10-2.
Okay.
10-2 back in the day gets you to a Rose Bowl. 10-2 gets you a lot of things. It's certainly you're playing on New Year's Day. Indiana is going to wind up playing in the conference championship without having are they going to beat Ohio State? I mean, I guess they could, and I mean, who would have thought Ohio State and Indiana is going to play for a berth in the title game?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But that's the other part of this huge glob of a conference now, is that teams like Indiana and Illinois can have 10-2 seasons, or hell, Indiana might be 11-1, and they've played basically nobody other than the one or two great teams right now in the conference. And I think that's weird. Like Indiana has the best. This is the best start they've ever had in the history of the program.
Okay.
If they'd have done that in 1994 or in 2010 or something like that, it would to me be a lot bigger deal than it is now. It's a big deal. And again, I'm sorry, I don't know how good they are based on who they played, and I'm not measuring it against Washington. Washington. Last year's Washington, maybe. That's weird, isn't it?
I don't think it's any different than a team of the past. It's just the way the schedule shook out. Like that's just
but there's so much more of an opportunity to not to I guess slide under the radar that way and have these sneaky 10-2 seasons, because Illinois plays Penn State and Oregon on the road, and other than that, like who the hell have they played that's any good?
Yeah, I would agree.
Most times it's not like that. I mean, 2006 Wisconsin was kind of like that, but they didn't play. The only ranked team they played was Michigan, and they lost. They didn't get blown out or anything. They lost, but I mean, Wisconsin was 11-1 in the regular season in 2006.
Yeah, well, I mean, you had some Chris team. I mean, 2015 was the same thing.
I suppose. Yeah, I guess you can come up with some counter examples, but
I mean, there are. I guess the point.
The opportunity is there.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess my point is that I saw Indiana play a middle class Big Ten team in Nebraska and demolish them.
Mm-hmm.
I have not seen Illinois do that.
Sure.
So that's why, I mean, I don't really, I'm not arguing a power ranking. I'm just saying arbitrarily put those guys there. And then there's a great big chunk in the middle class that's
agreed,
highlighted by, I guess, Illinois.
I actually think it's like that in all of FBS. I mean, I don't know where you draw the line after Georgia or Texas, or I don't know, but like after that, I don't know. Alabama's probably still in that elite category, but after like from 6, 7, 8 to 30, I mean,
I guess I would argue, yeah. I mean, it's Auburn, Kentucky, Mississippi State on the bottom, right?
Yeah.
I mean, maybe you.
No. I'm not saying the SEC. I'm not saying the SEC. I'm saying like all of FBS.
No, I know what you're saying, but I'm saying in a big conference, you have a big center mishmash now, right? Because you go from
Sorry.
I guess Alabama down to South Carolina, or Arkansas down to South Carolina, but I feel like that one maybe is a bit more stratified. Like the middle class is a little shrunk, but not important. That could vary year to year. Anyways, we're way long. We got to go here.
We had extracurricular talk, though.
Yeah,
That was so good. 5 minutes plus. Anyway, no, you're right.
I just thought, trying to wrap my head around what these conferences mean now is getting a little weird. Anyways, we'll be back next week. I don't think we have anything else to touch on. We better not, because Cody's going to kill us. Ready to talk Iowa after your big visit, Max. Till the next time.
Till the next time.
Enjoy the conversation? Head on over to buckaroundpodcast.com to find all the ways to connect with the show, links to our Patreon page, and feeds for every major podcasting platform. We want to thank each and every one of our patrons. You make this podcast possible. This has been The Buck Around, Badger football analysis from a fan perspective.